I didn't mean to fall asleep. One moment I was staring into the gravy boat, letting the steam blur my reflection, and the next, my chin dipped onto my chest and the room exploded in laughter. Not with me, never with me, but always at me. Did she just nod off? At the table? Jolene's voice was sharp and syrupy, designed to entertain and humiliate all at once. That's a new low, even for you, Lainey. Eliza, my mother, didn't say much, but the way she slowly dabbed her mouth with her napkin before looking at me with a sigh louder than words was enough. It was the same look she gave the dog when it chewed through the garden hose. Tired, disappointed, ready to move on without addressing the damage. Walter, my father, didn't even look up. His phone buzzed once, twice, and he scrolled on, sipping wine as if he weren't surrounded by flesh and blood. His presence in the room was like the chandelier above the table, expensive, cold, and more ornamental than useful. I apologized, mumbled something about a double shift and low blood sugar. My words evaporated under Jolene's chuckle. That job is going to kill you, you know, or maybe just bore you to death. She leaned back in her seat, swirled her wine like she was auditioning for a lifestyle segment. You're still waitressing, right? At that place with the sad breadsticks. I nodded. My voice caught in my throat, stuck somewhere between wanting to defend myself and knowing it would be pointless. Any protest would be met with that same practice dismissal, her gift, her weapon. They moved on, talked about her wedding venue, Napa maybe, or somewhere in Vermont. Something rustic but not tacky, she said, and Eliza cooed in agreement. They left no room for me to re-enter the conversation. I pushed mashed potatoes around my plate. The taste was dull. Maybe my mouth had forgotten how to register comfort. My life outside this dining room wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Most days I worked at Marlowe's, a mid-tier restaurant trying too hard to be trendy. Edison bulbs and truffle fries couldn't mask its slow decay. I managed table rotations, charmed difficult patrons, and memorized the menu changes better than the actual chef. No one knew my name there either. I was just the quiet girl who stayed late and never called out. It wasn't that I didn't have dreams. I just never said them out loud. When I was 12, I made a raspberry tart and presented it to Eliza with nervous pride. She tasted it, said the crust was too dry, and suggested I stick to reading. Your hands aren't cut out for that kind of work, she said, and the pan never left the cabinet again. Jolene had always been the star. Honor roll, debate team, early admission to Duke. Everything she touched turned to gold, and Eliza polished her achievements like trophies she'd won herself. I tried not to resent it. I tried to be happy in my smaller, quieter ways. But it's hard to feel full on crumbs. Walter was always working. When he wasn't at the firm, he was reviewing cases at home, speaking in a low baritone that made people lean in even when his words weren't interesting. We didn't have heart-to-hearts. We didn't have arguments. We just didn't. I spent nights watching food documentaries, sketching out recipes I was too afraid to try, wondering if people could change their lives in the middle of them, or if some paths just grew roots too deep to leave. That night, after the dinner ended and they retreated into the living room to toast Jolene's engagement with overpriced champagne, I stayed behind to clear the table. Eliza always said it was the least I could do. As I scraped plates into the trash, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. Hair limp, eyes sunken, back hunched. I looked like someone's assistant. I didn't look like someone who could ever own a place, run a kitchen, change the story. But a thought cracked through the silence, small and sharp. What if they were wrong about me? I didn't know where it came from. Maybe it was the sting of the laughter or the weight of Jolene's smirk still sitting on my chest. Maybe it was exhaustion reaching critical mass. Whatever it was, it flickered behind my eyes and didn't fade. I went to my room that night and pulled out the old food journal I hadn't touched since college. The leather cover was worn. The pages still smelled like cinnamon and pencil shavings. I flipped to the first blank page and wrote down a single word. Start. It wasn't a plan, not yet, but it was something. And for the first time in a long while, I felt awake. They say memory isn't linear. It curls in on itself like steam rising from a simmering pot. One moment I'm standing in my apartment's cramped kitchen, stirring a pan of caramelized onions, and the next, I'm 8 years old again, burning my fingertips on a hot cookie tray while my mother sighs so loudly you'd think I ruined her entire day. Eliza Rhodes doesn't raise slobs. She'd snap, wiping counters that didn't need wiping. Next time, don't waste good ingredients trying to play house. I wasn't playing, I was trying. I had copied the recipe from her old Southern cookbook, sticky notes littering the pages like crumbs. But trying wasn't enough. Not when Jolene was winning spelling bees and tennis trophies, smiling with that plastic grace our mother adored. Jolene's success became the standard, and I became the family ghost. Seen, not heard. Useful only when someone needed a favor or an ego boost. If I cried, I was dramatic. If I spoke up, I was difficult. So I learned to fold my voice into smaller and smaller shapes until it fit neatly behind everyone else's. Our grandmother, Mary Bell, was the original Rhodes woman prototype. She ran a roadside diner in Georgia with a fist of steel and an apron that never wrinkled. When she passed, she left behind more debt than legacy. Still, Mom kept her portrait in the kitchen like a relic. She never took a day off, fed 3 kids, managed that diner, and never once complained. She'd remind us, "You girls should take notes." What she meant was, be strong, not soft. Hide your cracks. Crying was weakness, and Delaney, you've always been so fragile. I started cooking in secret. After school, when no one was home, I'd experiment with whatever was left in the pantry. My first stew was a disaster, but something about the chopping, the slow bubbling, the transformation, it made me feel like I existed, like I could make something that mattered. Of course, when Mom came home and caught the mess, she dumped the pot in the sink and grounded me for a week. Nobody wants a daughter who wastes food pretending to be a chef. Still, I kept trying, quietly, carefully, until one day I just stopped. Now, years later, I stand in this dimly lit apartment kitchen, peeling carrots like it's penance. My boyfriend Asher lounges in the living room, his voice filtering through like smoke. "You're spending a lot of time cooking lately," he says, flipping through his phone. "You sure it's not just a phase?" He says it with a smirk, the same smirk Jolene used when she caught me crying in the laundry room after Eliza's annual Christmas speech about real achievements. The same smirk Mom wore when she glanced at my community college diploma and said, "At least you finished something." Asher doesn't hit me, he doesn't scream, but his words sink into me like hooks, soft and sharp. When I bring him dinner, he barely looks up. "Could have used more salt," he mutters, and I pretend it's constructive. The kitchen, once my secret sanctuary, now feels like a cage. I cook not for joy, but to prove I'm good enough, to earn approval that never comes. I read recipes like scripture, measure every pinch, every stir, and still, it's never right. But something shifted a few weeks ago. It started with a message. "Saw your comment on the sous vide forum. You've got a smart palate. Ever thought about competing?" It came from someone named Inkendiron, an anonymous user who seemed to know exactly how to get under my skin, in the best way. At first, I ignored it. I didn't compete. I survived. But they kept writing. Thoughtful, challenging, respectful. They talked about food like it had weight, like it told stories. They asked questions I didn't know how to answer. One night, after Asher belittled another risotto attempt, I found myself staring at a registration form for the Winter Hearth Culinary Challenge. Open to amateurs, anonymous submissions allowed. Without thinking, I typed Lainey R. and uploaded a photo of my grandmother's sweet potato tart. I didn't tell anyone, not even myself, not really. It felt like dropping a letter into a mailbox in the dead of night. Private, foolish, thrilling. I didn't expect a response, but I got one. Your tart was shortlisted. Final round is in person. RSVP required. I stared at the screen, heart hammering, and for the first time in years, I felt something other than shame in my chest. I felt scared, but I also felt alive. That night, I stood in the kitchen long after midnight, touching the scar on my wrist from the old cookie tray burn. The window was fogged up, the radio low. I imagined my younger self watching me, hopeful. I whispered aloud, "You were never too soft. They just didn't know how to hold you." The kitchen isn't safe. It's memory and pain and failure, but it's also mine. For now, I'm still cooking in secret, still hiding my name behind initials and half-truths. But for the first time, I'm not trying to prove anything to them. I'm doing this for me. The fight started over a fork, or maybe it was the way I used it. Too loud, too slow, too something. Asher set his glass down harder than necessary, his voice slicing through the air like a cleaver. Could you not chew like that? It's distracting. I looked up, blinking. He wasn't smiling. He hadn't smiled at me in weeks. Not really. But I apologized anyway because that's what I did. That's what Delaney Rhodes did. Shrunk to fit the spaces no one else wanted to fill. He turned his attention back to the TV. I just think, with everything going on, maybe now's not the time to play kitchen prodigy. You've got Jolene's party coming up, and your hours are already a mess. He said play like it was a game, like I hadn't been tearing myself in half working shifts at the diner, then slipping into borrowed whites and sprinting across town to the Ember Room. The historic, dim-lit, quietly crumbling restaurant tucked between a dry cleaner and a jazz club. My secret. I had applied to the internship as a joke, half believing they'd toss my chart and my resume into the trash. But they didn't. They called. And when I walked through that stained glass door for the first time, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. I told Asher it was a second job, something temporary. I didn't mention that the chef, only referred to as Mr. Grady by the staff, never appeared before 8 p.m., or that the walls of the kitchen whispered stories in steam and sauce, or that I had started breathing differently there, deeper, like I belonged. He didn't need to know. He wouldn't have understood. Jolene's engagement party became the looming deadline, the ticking clock I couldn't mute. Eliza called every other day, reminding me that family shows up, which I translated as don't embarrass us. I was expected to cater the whole thing, minimal budget, maximum praise. I agreed because Jolene always got what she wanted, and I didn't yet know how to say no. By now, the Ember Room was turning into a second skin, a cracked one with holes and burns and a chef no one had seen sober in months, but it was also magic. The kind of place where mistakes turned into discoveries and old pots held new possibilities. The kitchen manager, Gloria, took to me quickly. "You've got flavor instincts," she said once. "Don't let anyone salt that out of you." At night, when I returned to our apartment, I kept quiet. Asher had become all edges. His disapproval wasn't loud, but it was constant. He called the internship my little escape plan, said I was trying to become someone I wasn't, and he was right, I was. Every shift at the Ember Room peeled back a layer. I started writing again, not essays or shopping lists, but thoughts, a food journal. It started with scraps, sweetness like a secret, heat you don't taste until it's gone. Words I'd once swallowed came pouring out, strange and urgent. Recipes bled into memories. My hands couldn't write fast enough. Late one night, after a double shift, I opened the app where Ink and Iron had first messaged me. I told them about the contest win, the internship. They responded almost instantly, "Proud of you. Keep cooking like it hurts." I stared at those words longer than I should have. I didn't know who they were. I didn't even know if they were real. But they believed in me, which at that moment felt more solid than anything Asher or my family had ever offered. 2 days before Jolene's party, the secret unraveled. I was prepping lamb ribs in the back when a man in a black hoodie and thick-rimmed glasses wandered into the kitchen, silent as fog. Everyone froze. Gloria whispered something, then gestured toward me. The man looked at the plate I had garnished, saffron-infused aioli, orange peel curls, perfect sear marks, and then at me. He nodded once. "You're the one from the tart contest," he said. My stomach turned to ash. "You're Ink and Iron," I whispered. He blinked. "I didn't mean to scare you." Vincent Grady, the culinary ghost, former TV star, food memoirist, and now my online mentor. I thought he was a figment, a name behind a screen, but he was standing in front of me, all awkward angles and quiet power. "I wanted to see what kind of cook would send a dish like that without ego," he said. "You didn't sign your name, that told me everything." I stood still. My hands smelled like rosemary and regret. "I'm not qualified," I muttered. He looked me dead in the eyes. "Nobody starts qualified, they start hungry." He turned to leave, then paused. "Don't let that boyfriend of yours keep you small. I've seen it before. It ends in burnt dreams." And just like that, he disappeared into the dark hallway. No goodbye, just truth. That night, Asher found my food journal. He waited until I came home, sitting there like a jury. "What is this, Delaney? You've been playing Iron Chef while I'm footing the bills?" I didn't flinch. Not anymore. "I've been becoming someone," I said, "and you wouldn't recognize her." He called me selfish, called the internship a phase, said nobody would take a girl like me seriously in a place like that. I didn't fight back. I just packed a bag, left the journal on the kitchen table, and walked out. The hallway light flickered as I passed. The elevator groaned, the street was quiet, but inside me, something was roaring to life. I headed toward the Ember Room, my second home, my first truth, and I didn't look back. The first thing you notice about the Ember Room is the heat. Not the kind from the ovens, but something older, thicker. It clings to the walls like old smoke and regret. The kitchen is half chaos, half choreography. People shout over clattering pans, flames leap too high, and the air always smells like scorched time and ambition. It's not the kind of place you survive by being soft. My first day, a sous chef named Garrett knocked over a tray of braised ribs and screamed at a line cook so viciously I nearly dropped my station knife. Nobody blinked. No one stepped in. This was the rhythm: intensity, speed, control, or failure. Vincent didn't speak to me for 2 days. He moved like a ghost, drifting through the kitchen without touching the floor, eyes sharp but body unraveling. I saw the tremor in his hands when he thought no one was looking. He barked orders with surgical precision, then disappeared behind the staff door, reappearing only when something went wrong, or when he wanted to test someone. When he finally acknowledged me, it wasn't with a compliment. It was a challenge. "I want a dish no one's tasted before. 3 ingredients. Make it talk." That was all he said before walking off. I froze. My hands trembled as I grabbed a notepad. I thought of saffron, duck fat, charred lemon. I thought of how my mother used to yell at me when I overcooked rice. How Jolene once fed my mashed sweet potatoes to the dog and said even he gagged. I thought of how much I wanted to bury that part of me and how much I didn't want to forget it. So I made something weird, something mine. Black garlic puree, butternut squash gnocchi, a lemon ash crumble that crunched like a secret. Vincent didn't smile when he tasted it. He just nodded once and walked away. That night, he sent me a text. "Come back after hours. Bring your knives." We began meeting late, long after the other staff had cleared out. The silence of the kitchen then was holy. We experimented like scientists, failed like artists. He taught me balance, restraint, but also rule-breaking. I watched him carefully, learning how he stitched technique to instinct, how grief haunted his timing. He never talked about what happened to his career, but the scars were obvious. Too many nights, too much pressure, too little sleep. "You've got scars too," he said once, peeling a blood orange. "I can taste them in your food." At home, something in me was shifting. I didn't flinch when Asher texted. I didn't say yes to things I didn't want. When Eliza called, I let it ring out. I started locking my journal again, not out of fear, but ownership. Then Jolene found out. I don't know if it was gossip or instinct, but she showed up at my apartment with a bottle of wine and that performative warmth she always wears like costume jewelry. "Is it true?" she asked after 2 sips. "You're working at some old dump with a washed-up chef?" I stared at her. "It's a historic restaurant, and his name is Vincent Grady." She laughed. "He's a recluse with a panic disorder. Are you trying to sabotage your future?" "My future isn't yours to plan," I said, calm as cold water. Her eyes narrowed. "You really think this phase is going to fix you?" And there it was. The wound, still open, still bleeding. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. But 3 days later, sabotage struck. The night was thick with rain. I was on pastry duty, nerves tight, when I saw Jolene across the dining room. She wasn't alone. Eliza was with her, clutching a silk scarf like it might shield her from common air. My breath caught in my throat. I ducked behind the prep shelf, heart slamming. No way they knew. They were here to eat, not to see me. They wouldn't recognize me. Not in this uniform, not in this light. "Table 12, VIP, Gloria called. "Fire the lamb, and the beet tartare." My dish. I hesitated, just for a second. Then I plated it anyway, gently, carefully, Like it didn't matter that my mother, the woman who had never once praised a meal I made, was about to critique it. I watched from behind the kitchen curtain. Eliza took a bite of the tartare, chewed slowly. Jolene waited. Then Eliza wiped her mouth and leaned back. Pretentious, trying too hard, texture's off. I felt the blow, even through the glass. Jolene smirked. They left before dessert. Vincent found me in the walk-in fridge 10 minutes later, sitting on an overturned crate, hands clenched. "She didn't know it was yours," he said. "I don't know if that makes it better or worse." He leaned against the wall, exhaling slow. "You're not here to impress ghosts." I didn't speak. I knew it was her the second I saw that forced elegance. You cook against her. Every dish you make is a rebellion. "That's not healthy," I muttered. "No," he agreed. "But it's honest." Something in me cracked then, not broke, just shifted, like a shelf giving way to light. The next night, I redid the tartare. I added pickled radish, a shiso leaf. I kept the beat. I didn't erase the dish. I rewrote it. Vincent took one bite and smiled just slightly. "You stopped cooking to prove something," he said. "Now you're cooking because you can't not." The Ember Room wasn't salvation. It was fire, and fire didn't save, it transformed, and I was finally learning how to burn the right things. The moment I saw Eliza's face through the kitchen pass, the world tilted. I felt it before I understood it, tightening in my chest, a shiver down my arms, heat pressing behind my eyes. The clang of cutlery, the hiss of the stovetop, all of it collapsed into static. She didn't recognize me in the chef's coat, but I recognized every razor-thin smile and judgmental glance. I fled the line, shoulders brushing past Gloria, boots slipping slightly on the tile. My breath wouldn't catch. I ducked into the back pantry, where the smell of flour and old wood gave no comfort. Then he appeared. Vincent. Silent as always. He didn't ask, just knelt beside me, a worn dish towel in one hand, the other outstretched, palm up. "5 things you can see," he said. I blinked. "What?" "Do it," I gasped, voice shaking. "Apron, floor, shelves, my hands, your shoes. 4 things you can touch." He kept going until I could breathe again, until I wasn't drowning in the porcelain shards of my past. Later that night, after Eliza left and the restaurant settled, Vincent stood beside me near the back door where the staff took smoke breaks. "She doesn't deserve that much space in your head," he said quietly. "She built the place inside it," I replied. He didn't argue. The next morning, Asher was waiting at the apartment. I didn't ask how he got in. He paced the kitchen, my journal in his hand, open. "You've lost it," he hissed. "You think any of this means something? You think because you're cooking for people who don't know you, you're suddenly a chef?" I tried to take the journal, but he held it higher. "You lied to me. You've been sneaking off, rewriting history like you're some kind of, artist now?" The words came faster, sharper. He hit every nerve, every insecurity I thought I'd buried. He tore through my boundaries like they were paper. "You are not enough to make this work," he said finally, quieter. "You never have been." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I walked out. The bag I packed was light. Just my knives, my apron, a change of clothes, and the food journal, pages slightly smudged from his grip. I left behind a note that said nothing except, "Don't call me again." Gloria found me outside the Ember Room an hour later, curled on the steps like someone waiting for shelter. "Got a spare cot upstairs," she said, like it was nothing. "Cooks sleep here all the time." That night, I moved into the small room above the restaurant, nestled between storage and the break room. It had a twin bed, a metal lamp, and a dusty window. I made it mine within an hour. The next morning, Vincent handed me a new prep list. "Longer hours, more responsibility. If you're going to live here, you work for it." I didn't flinch. I nodded. And so began the grind. Vincent pushed me harder than anyone ever had. Timing drills, blind taste tests, menu simulations under pressure. My fingers blistered, my knees ached. I memorized every burner's quirk, every staff member's tells. We didn't talk about our pasts, but our silences started saying more than words. One night, We stood over the stove, testing reductions. He passed me a spoonful. "What does that taste like?" he asked. I paused. Bitterness, burnt sugar, something that was supposed to be sweet. He nodded, watching me. "Make it better." I worked for hours, adjusting, refining. When I finally got it right, I wrote about it in the journal, not as a recipe, but as a metaphor. Bitterness must be tempered, not erased. That's how you reclaim it. That's when the journal became something else. I stopped treating it like a diary and started crafting it like a manifesto. Each page was a declaration: who I was, what I survived, what I tasted in grief and healing. I added sketches, memories, ingredient pairings that echoed emotional patterns. It wasn't just about food, it was about naming what had been taken from me and taking it back. One morning before service, I took a stack of old plates from the back and smashed them behind the dumpster, one by one, white porcelain shattering against the concrete. Jolene's mockery, Eliza's disapproval, Asher's disdain, every shard a freedom I hadn't known I could claim. That night, I burned a bag of old clothes behind the restaurant. The scent of fabric and smoke drifted through the alley as I watched the flames consume the pastel cardigans and fitted dresses my mother used to approve. I didn't want to look respectable anymore. I wanted to look like me. The next day, a letter arrived, no return address, just my name, scrawled in elegant penmanship on an off-white envelope. Inside, a single-page document yellowed with age, a legal clause, a forgotten amendment in the Ember Room's founding agreement, dated decades back. It stated that in the event of both original owners' heirs participating in operational duties, a dormant joint ownership right would reactivate. There was a handwritten note beneath it. "She gave it up. You didn't. That makes it yours. No signature." I read it 3 times before I understood. Eliza, her mother, Vincent's father, a deal made before I was born, abandoned by pride, buried by time, and now, mine. I sat alone in the empty dining room surrounded by velvet booths and aging candle wax, the letter trembling in my hands. This place had never just been a job. It was an inheritance I never asked for, a legacy I had unknowingly resurrected, and I had no intention of letting it go. The envelope sat at the bottom of Vincent's office drawer, beneath stacks of receipts and crumpled dish orders, waiting like a secret too old to shout. Gloria handed it to me one night after a brutal Friday dinner rush. "Found this cleaning up the back office. Thought you should see it." Inside was a photograph. Sepia-toned, slightly warped from moisture, but unmistakable. My grandmother, Maribel Rhodes, stood outside the Ember Room's front door, apron dusted with flour, one hand resting on the shoulder of a tall man in chef whites. Written in faint script on the back, Maribel and Theo Grady, partners in flame, 1973. I took it upstairs to my room and sat on the edge of the bed, staring. It felt like a page had turned in a book I hadn't realized I was reading. Vincent confirmed it the next morning. They opened it together. Before it was a restaurant, it was a smokehouse. She handled the front, he ran the kitchen. "And then?" I asked. He hesitated. "Then she got pregnant with your mother. Walked away from everything. Claimed she'd return but never did." More digging revealed more fractures. Maribel's departure hadn't been graceful. A scandal, rumors of infidelity, unpaid debts, and some kind of falling out that splintered her from the Grady family and her business. Eliza, barely a teenager at the time, had been yanked away mid-school year and moved to a new town. By the time the Ember Room reopened in its second form, her name was erased from its walls. And then came me. I found the truth buried in an old county filing office, legal documents showing Maribel's relinquishment of ownership, followed by a handwritten addendum that voided her family's stake if none of her heirs returned to culinary operations within 30 years. 30 years ended last spring. My birth, it turns out, came 6 months after Eliza had applied to a culinary institute in New York, an acceptance letter she never used. She didn't just lose her chance at a career, she abandoned her mother's legacy, and she blamed me. I understood her venom now. It wasn't just control, it was regret. Hardened, calcified, and turned outward. With every shift at the Ember Room, I began reclaiming that legacy, not out of spite, but hunger. hunger to understand where I came from, to finish what Maribel had started. I dug through Vincent's archives, scanning handwritten menus, ingredient notes, stained recipe cards with fading ink. I recreated one of Maribel's dishes, a bourbon-glazed catfish over creamed corn, and fused it with a citrus zest and ginger-spiced oil. Southern Roots, modern lift. The staff, used to Vincent's minimalist palate, raised eyebrows. Catfish, Garrett sniffed. We doing swamp food now? But after one bite, he went silent. Then took another. Vincent didn't say anything either. He just nodded. That nod meant more than applause. I kept going. I pulled recipes out of the grave, remixed them with techniques I'd learned through failure and instinct. Collard green pierogies, cornbread madeleines. My food started to sing in a voice that was finally mine. But ghosts don't stay buried. It happened one morning when I came downstairs and found my food journal missing. Pages of notes, annotated memories, sketches of spice blends and flavor arcs, all gone. I tore the kitchen apart. No one had seen it. Gloria said maybe I misplaced it, but I knew better. 2 days later, Jolene posted a photo on social media. Excited to share my journey into Southern fusion cuisine. Watch for my exclusive piece in Epicurean reverie. I froze. There, on her counter, sat my journal, my handwriting, my pain, stolen and rebranded. Vincent found me outside the restaurant later, fists clenched, jaw tight. She's using my words, I said. We'll stop her, he said, but I didn't want just justice, I wanted the truth. 2 weeks passed before I heard from the magazine. An editor named Camille called the restaurant. She sounded curious, wary. Jolene Rhodes submitted a piece for publication, but something didn't sit right, she said. The writing has a voice I've read before. Your food blog, Lainey Cooks in Silence, you posted years ago. Same syntax, same emotional texture. I nearly dropped the phone. She couldn't answer my questions about technique, Camille added. So I started digging. Found you listed as a contributor on a recipe forum. Your writing is distinct. My throat dried. She doesn't know you're calling? I asked. Number. But if this is your work and you're willing to claim it, we'll run a feature on you instead. You'd have to step into the spotlight. Publicly. The line was quiet. Then, will you? I didn't answer right away. I sat with the weight of that choice. Jolene had always been the public one, the polished Rhodes girl who never stumbled. But she didn't bleed into her pages. She didn't season her sentences with history. I did. I'll do it, I said. After I hung up, I returned to the kitchen. Vincent raised an eyebrow. You good? He asked. I smiled. I think it's finally my name on the plate. And just like that, the air tasted different. The Ember Room was never meant to hold this many people. Not in the dining room, not in the kitchen, and definitely not in my heart. But tonight it pulsed with something electric. We kept it quiet. Word of mouth only, no flyers, no press, just a tasting menu announced with hand-lettered cards on each table. Legacy reclaimed. A night of revival by Dr. Vincent was wary. Too soon, he said a week before, too public. But I needed it, not for fame, for closure. I spent days in the kitchen, resurrecting dishes from old journals and scorched memories. My grandmother's collards, reborn with orange blossom vinegar. Fried oyster bites served with microgreens and cornbread crisps. A dessert trio of bourbon pudding, spiced peach gelée, and molasses meringue. 3 generations of women distilled into sugar and salt. The staff grumbled at first. Garrett rolled his eyes at the menu's sentimentality, but he stayed late to help with prep. Gloria brought in extra herbs from her garden. Even the dishwasher, Nate, offered to plate. Something shifted, slowly but irreversibly. Vincent, always composed behind the pass, grew jittery as the night approached. He checked the menus, rewrote inventory, paced between shelves. I'm not good in crowds anymore, he admitted, voice too soft to meet my eyes. You don't have to be, I said. Just be here. But when the guests arrived, industry friends, skeptical critics, local chefs curious about the revival, he disappeared. I found his coat draped over a chair in the office. His phone left behind. I panicked. For a second, I couldn't move. My name was on the menu, my recipes, but Vincent had been my anchor, and now the floor felt loose. Then Gloria grabbed my arm, urgent. Table 3 needs wine pairings. Table 7 asked to meet the chef. I looked down at my apron, smudged with beet and flour, and made the decision. I'll do it. I stepped behind the pass, took control of the line, issued orders, checked plates. You good? Garrett called, his voice sharper now, but steady. Better than ever. The first wave went out smooth. People murmured over the flavors, made that quiet sound only made when food connects to memory, when taste becomes testimony. And then Jolene walked in. She was dressed like it was a gala, not a pop-up dinner. Shiny heels, deep red lipstick, phone clutched in a perfectly manicured hand. I saw her scan the room, then freeze when she spotted me behind the pass. Her expression faltered. For the first time in a long time, she looked like she didn't know what to do. She made her way to the center of the dining room, loud enough to draw eyes. I wasn't invited, but I figured, why not see how my recipes turned out? The room fell quiet. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped out, wiping sweat from my brow. I didn't smile. They weren't yours, I said. She laughed, brittle. I shared them with a wider audience. You're welcome. You stole them? You took my story, my voice, my food. People shifted. Forks paused midair. Camille, the magazine editor, stood up in the back. I can confirm that, she said clearly. And we've pulled Jolene's piece. It was plagiarized. Every word was Delaney's. Jolene turned red, furious. You always needed a pity narrative, didn't you? Poor little Delaney. If it wasn't for me. If it wasn't for you, I interrupted, I wouldn't have found my silence, and I wouldn't have broken it. I turned to the room. I grew up being told to be quiet, to stay small, to serve. Every dish you've eaten tonight was built from those silences. Recipes I wasn't allowed to cook. Dreams I wasn't allowed to say out loud. I heard the door creak. Eliza. She stood at the back, arms crossed, lips pursed, expression unreadable. I used to think love was something you earned by disappearing, I continued, voice louder now, by making space for others to shine. But this is mine. I'm not borrowing it. I'm not pretending anymore. No one spoke. Eliza's eyes didn't soften, but they didn't harden either. Something flickered there, something close to recognition. Jolene turned and stormed out. Eliza stayed. That somehow felt more shocking. After the final course, I collapsed into a kitchen stool, exhausted, and then Vincent walked in. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, but his eyes were clear. I panicked, he said. I noticed. He held out a manila folder. I was going to wait until the right moment, but there's no such thing. I opened it. Inside, signed papers, a legal transfer of ownership, his share of the Ember Room to me. You're the future of this place, he said, of my father's legacy. You revived something I thought was dead. You gave it voice. I stared at the ink, the official notary stamp. My hand shook. I don't know if I'm ready. You are, he said. You've been ready since the first time you cooked with your scars showing. I laughed, or maybe cried. It felt like both. Outside, the last guests filtered out, full and quiet. Inside, I finally felt what full could mean. Not crowded, not controlled, complete. Eliza showed up the morning after the tasting, wearing grief like pearls, tight around her neck and designed to impress. She waited in the dining room, untouched coffee growing cold between her hands. I knew the look on her face. I had spent my entire childhood decoding it, the flick of disapproval, the jaw clenched just enough to hurt her and not me. You embarrassed yourself last night, she said before I even sat down. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She leaned forward, low and dangerous. Whatever sentimental nonsense Vincent gave you, it ends now. The Ember Room belongs to this family. I won't watch you dismantle what we could have built together. I'm not dismantling it, I said calmly. I'm rebuilding it, without the rot. Her voice rose. This is still my legacy. No, I said. You gave it up. She flinched like I'd slapped her. You were supposed to be my reset, she hissed. My redemption. I didn't get to be the chef, so I raised one. But now you want to rewrite the story without me in it. I'm not rewriting, I said. I'm telling it honestly. Her face twisted. You always needed someone to blame. No, I said. I needed someone to see me. She didn't respond, just stood, stiff and silent, and walked out. That was our final chapter, not with a bang, but with her back turning for good. The fallout was immediate. Jolene tried to spin the tasting night into a PR nightmare, hinting in interviews that I had emotionally manipulated our family to gain sympathy. She posted filtered photos with captions like, "Some of us create with grace, not grudges." But the public saw through it. The magazine Camille worked for ran a profile on me titled "The Taste of Truth: How One Chef is Reclaiming Her Silence." People started to show up at the restaurant, not for the food alone, but for the story behind it. That's when Asher reappeared. He sent a formal letter through a lawyer demanding financial compensation for emotional distress and joint assets, citing the apartment and even my journal as co-owned materials. I stared at the letter in disbelief, then laughed, a bitter, tired laugh that didn't reach my eyes. I posted my side, just one post, no names, no drama, just the truth. He told me I was nothing. I believed him. Then I started cooking and I remembered who I was. Abuse doesn't always leave bruises. Sometimes it leaves silence. This is me breaking it. The response was overwhelming. Stories flooded in from others. Survivors, chefs, daughters, strangers. They didn't want revenge, they wanted connection, and I had given them that, but it didn't make me invincible. One night after service, I stayed behind, alone in the kitchen. I pulled out my grandmother's recipe card, yellowed, creased, still smelling faintly of vanilla and thyme. Sweet potato pie? Simple, sacred. I made the crust slowly, fingers trembling. As the filling thickened on the stove, something inside me cracked open. Tears blurred my vision. I couldn't stop them. By the time the pie was in the oven, I was sobbing, back against the cold wall, apron soaked, face hot. Not from failure, from everything, from years of being ignored, from nights begging for love in silence, from watching Eliza break herself to fit into rooms that were never meant for her. From wishing Jolene would just stop winning, from guilt, from relief, from becoming someone I wasn't sure I deserved to be. The smell filled the kitchen, brown sugar, nutmeg, burnt edges, and in it I felt her. Mary Bell, the woman I never met but somehow carried in my bones. I whispered thanks into the empty kitchen. That's when the front door opened. I scrambled to wipe my face as a tall man in a tan blazer stepped inside. "Is this a bad time?" he asked. I didn't call ahead, just had to taste for myself. He introduced himself. Reed Collins, lead food critic for the National Taste. I blinked. "Excuse me?" He smiled. Word gets around fast when something real happens in food. I didn't have a prepared menu. I didn't have anything plated. All I had was that pie. A single dish, cracked at the edge, imperfect as hell. I cut him a slice and poured him black coffee. He ate slowly, silent, methodical. Then he looked up. "You're not cooking for approval, are you?" "No," I said. "Not anymore." "Good," he said, "because this is something else." He slid a card across the counter. "We want to feature you, not just a story, your own show, a spotlight segment. You cook, you talk, you teach, we listen." My hands shook again, but this time from something gentler. A door opening, a future offered, a voice unmuted. The kitchen gleamed brighter than I remembered. Not because of new tiles or stainless steel, though we had plenty of those now, but because of what lived in it. Legacy, scar tissue, a slow, rising fire that never burned me down, only shaped me. The morning of my national television debut felt unreal. Lights had been installed above the prep line, cameras mounted discreetly in corners. A producer from the National Taste had me wired for sound before I'd even buttoned my chef's coat. "This is where the show starts," she said, smiling. "But for you, I guess it started a long time ago." I nodded. It started in silence. In the days leading up to the shoot, everything blurred into motion. Media outlets started circling after Reed Collins's article went viral. The flavor of survival, Delaney Rhodes isn't just cooking, she's reclaiming. Investment offers poured in, some from big-name restaurant groups, one from a boutique culinary arts foundation. Vincent and I reviewed them together. He let me read the terms. I let him see the future. Then he made the quietest announcement of all. I'm stepping down. I blinked. What? He leaned on the prep table, exhaustion tucked into his posture. You don't need a ghost in your kitchen, he said. You need space to make it yours. I argued for a minute, just out of habit, but the truth was in his eyes. He'd found peace. He wanted rest. And for once I didn't feel like I was being left behind. He handed me a folded note. Inside, a recipe card from his father and a single line in his handwriting. Don't follow it. Break it better. He left his keys on the hook, and just like that, I was executive chef. The staff reshuffled naturally. Gloria took on more training duties. Garrett, once skeptical, now led sauces. We hired new talent, people who'd felt pushed out of the industry for being too much or different. I didn't want polished resumes. I wanted lived experience. Meanwhile, Jolene and Eliza disappeared from public life. Jolene's social accounts went dark. Eliza retreated into a quiet suburb far from the food scene. I heard she'd taken up gardening. I didn't wish them ill, but I didn't wish them back either. The night before filming, I wandered through the kitchen alone. The lights dimmed, the silence warm, not empty. Each station echoed something. The cutting board where I first julienned ginger for Vincent, shaking. The walk-in fridge where I had my first panic attack after Eliza showed up. The pantry door where Jolene tried to steal my voice. The dish rack where Vincent first called me a chef. I moved slowly, touching surfaces, letting the ghosts speak. And then something strange happened. Behind the old industrial oven we'd finally decided to remove, I found a tin envelope. Dusty. Forgotten. Inside, a letter. Faded ink. Folded 3 times. Delaney, if this finds you, then something good happened. You found this place again? Or maybe it found you. I was never a good mother to your mother. I don't pretend otherwise. But I always dreamed that someone in our line would come back here, to this fire, and do it right. I see things in you I never saw in Eliza. Not because you're better, but because you're braver. You feel too much. And that's your strength, not your shame. Forgive me for what I couldn't give. Reclaim what we lost. This kitchen was always meant for you. Maribel, I sank to the floor, letter trembling in my hands. My heart cracked wide open. She had known, before I was born, before Eliza bent under the weight of her expectations, before I was told to hush, before I learned how to cry in silence. Maribel had seen the future, had named it. I read the letter again, then placed it carefully inside my food journal. It didn't feel like closure. It felt like ignition. The next morning, I stood in front of the camera, lights hot, crew quiet. The director counted down. 3, 2, 1. I took a breath. Welcome to Fire and Salt. I'm Delaney Rhodes, and today we're not just cooking, we're remembering. I began with sweet potato hash, told the story of my grandmother's pie, shared how spices became my language when words were too heavy. The director let me run past the script. The editor later said they'd never seen a first shoot so raw, so real. It wasn't perfect. My hands trembled. I forgot to smile once, but when I plated that final dish and looked into the camera, I didn't see fear. I saw a girl who had been told she was too much and a woman who made space for her anyway. I saw flame, I saw salt, and I saw everything they'd tried to bury rise back up, stronger. They say a kitchen reflects its chef. If that's true, then the Ember Room had been fire and fracture for too long. Sharp edges, unspoken rules, heat without heart. So when I took over, I didn't just repaint the walls or replace the rusted burners. I rewired its soul. We reopened as new Ember. Not a rebirth, a reckoning. The dining room was stripped of white tablecloths and pretension. We swapped them for mismatched chairs, reclaimed wood tables, soft light, and the scent of lemon thyme and fresh bread. The walls displayed old recipes handwritten in chalk, some from my grandmother, some from Vincent, a few from staff who never thought they'd be remembered. But the kitchen, that's where the real change began. I sat across from each applicant myself, not just resumes, stories. A woman in recovery from opioids, 5 years clean, who made the best grits I'd ever tasted. A single father who'd been in prison for 12 years but could dice onions like poetry. A deaf pastry chef whose chocolate souffle made the entire room cry. They weren't misfits, they were survivors. They knew silence and struggle like I did. And in them, I saw family. Not the one I was born into, but the one I chose. We built something that pulsed with second chances. Then, there was Salted Wounds and Sugared Dreams, my memoir, my cookbook, my history, plated in chapters. I wrote it between prep shifts and sleepless nights, stitching together memories with recipes. The chapter titles told my story better than I ever could. Bitterness can be tender. How to season silence. The first cut isn't always the deepest. The book sold faster than expected. Readers didn't just cook the meals. They wrote to say the words tasted like something they thought only they had swallowed. When the publisher asked who I wanted to send advance copies to, I hesitated for only a moment. I packed one with trembling hands, wrote a short letter, and mailed it to Eliza. No expectations, just a piece of what I carried. I hope it finds you in peace. I didn't check the mailbox for a reply. I wasn't doing this for her, I was doing it for me. Opening night of New Ember came fast. The crew buzzed like bees in dress rehearsal mode. The dining room was full of laughter and nerves. Staff hugged each other in the back, took selfies in aprons. Even Vincent showed up, off the clock, eyes bright. But then, outside, we heard the shouting. A group had gathered, locals, older regulars from the restaurant's early days. They held signs that read things like, "Bring back the real Ember," and "No more soap opera chefs." At the front of the group was a man I didn't recognize. Broad shoulders, flannel shirt, face lined like tree bark. He stared through the window at me, eyes narrowing. Gloria stepped beside me. "You know him?" "No." But I did, in pieces. After the dinner service started, he came in alone, uninvited, and sat quietly at the bar. I approached. "You're Delaney," he said, not as a question. "I am." He took out a folded napkin, handed it to me. "Your grandmother's handwriting. I recognized it right away." Inside was a tiny recipe, honey-glazed hush puppies, for Tommy, only he liked the burnt edges. I looked up slowly. "I'm Tommy," he said. "Your uncle." He explained everything. He'd been banished from the family after an argument with Maribel. Something about a debt, a betrayal, a boy who never quite lived up to the Rhodes name. Eliza had cut him out for good measure, using his absence as another cautionary tale in her endless rule book. "I watched you on TV," he said. "Thought I was looking at Maribel all over again." I didn't know what to say. He reached for his drink. "I protested outside because I was scared," he said. "I thought you were rewriting history." "I am," I said, "but not to erase anyone, to honor the parts we lost." He nodded, eyes softening. "I was wrong about you," he said. "She'd be proud." He left the hush puppy napkin on the bar and walked out into the night. Later, I hung that napkin in the kitchen, right next to Maribel's sweet potato pie card and Vincent's scrawled note. We were still serving dinner when someone told me there was a delivery at the front door. A single envelope. Inside, a newspaper clipping, a review of New Ember. Circled in red pen was a quote. "More than a meal, a reclamation no signature," but at the bottom of the envelope, in handwriting I knew too well, was one line. "You broke the silence, you win." It was from Eliza. That was the closest I'd get to an apology, and for once, it was enough. That night, after the last guest left and the last dish was washed, I stood alone in the kitchen. I looked at every station, every staff member's name etched on the chalk wall, every story, every scar. This was my family now, chosen, not inherited, built, not given, loved without permission. The silence between my uncle and me wasn't hostile. It was cautious, like we both knew we were walking barefoot across glass we hadn't broken. He came by the restaurant more often now, always during off hours. He brought dusty photo albums, old receipts from Maribel's smokehouse days, and stories that changed everything I thought I understood about our family. "Eliza wasn't born cold," he said one afternoon, spreading yellowed clippings across the prep table. She was made that way, piece by piece. He told me about the nights Maribel locked herself in the office, counting money and cursing missed deliveries, about how Eliza, barely 12, was already setting tables, memorizing menu prices, and overhearing things no child should. He talked about the shouting, the debts, the shame that came from always looking successful, but never quite being it. She wasn't just hard on you, he said gently. She was hardened before you were even born. I didn't forgive her in that moment, but something inside me softened. A breath I didn't know I'd been holding for years escaped. That night, I started the second edition of my memoir, not as an extension of the first, but as a reckoning. The title would remain Salted Wounds and Sugared Dreams, but the subtitle would change: What We Inherit, What We Heal. I interviewed my uncle across 3 nights. He spoke slowly, stopping often, like the truth still scraped his throat. He told me about the time he tried to run the front of house and got yelled at in front of a packed dining room, about the girl he loved and lost because he chose family obligation over freedom, about how he left and how no one ever called to ask him back. He cried once. I didn't, but I wrote it all down. Writing about Eliza was harder. I didn't want to defend her. I didn't want to hate her either. I wanted to tell the truth, and that meant naming both the damage and the pain beneath it. Trauma doesn't excuse abuse, but it explains the silence, the inherited fear, the rigid expectations, the way she carved her survival into me without asking if I needed it. To process it, I did what I always do. I cooked. I wanted to create something that held all of us inside it, something that honored our damage without tasting like bitterness. I called it the Silence Breaker. 3 layers, the base. Maribel's spiced cornbread crumble, dense, earthy, touched with rosemary and black pepper, the way she made it on Sundays after inventory checks. The middle, Eliza's signature smoked tomato jam. She used to make it without smiling, but it always made people lean forward with surprise. I modernized it with chili flakes and maple, a twist she'd never admit she liked. And the top, my own contribution. A whipped goat cheese mousse, light and tart, folded with burnt honey and lemon zest, hope in the form of flavor. It was layered in a glass dish, transparent. Nothing hidden, everything visible. I plated it for the team first. They ate in silence, then asked for seconds. Then I plated it for someone who couldn't taste it anymore. Maribel's grave was 20 miles outside the city, tucked behind an old church with a stone wall and a rusted gate. I hadn't been there since I was a child, taken on an obligatory holiday visit where no one said much. This time, I brought the dish on a wooden tray wrapped in linen. I placed it at the base of her headstone and knelt beside it. I didn't speak. I just sat. Let the breeze pass over. Let the soil know that something broken had been laid down gently. On the drive back, the air felt lighter, not clean, but lighter. The next morning, I arrived at New Ember to find Gloria waiting at the door, holding a wrapped parcel. "No return address," she said. I took it inside, peeled back the layers. Inside was a leather-bound cookbook, worn, corner-frayed, spine soft with use. On the inside cover was a name, E. Rhodes. It was Eliza's. Her notes scribbled in the margins, her revisions, her perfect handwriting now softened by time, page after page of ideas she'd never cooked, experiments she never finished. She had written in first person, not for approval, for herself. At the back, a loose slip of paper had been tucked in. For the archive. Let someone finish what I couldn't. I won't be visiting, but I'm watching. No name, but it didn't need one. I placed the book on the new bookshelf in the kitchen hallway, right between Vincent's first draft menus and my grandmother's handwritten thank you letters. No announcement, just presence. That afternoon, I led the team through the Silence Breaker, step by step. We didn't talk about the legacy we'd inherited. We didn't have to. We were tasting it, and this time it belonged to all of us. The room was full before the candles were even lit. New Ember hummed with something more than anticipation, something sacred. Not for critics or headlines, not even for the camera crew filming quietly in the background. This was for us, for the ones who had been cracked and discarded and had chosen instead to rise. The charity dinner had started as a simple idea, a way to honor the people who inspired me most, survivors of trauma, silence, systems built to erase them. But it had grown into something bigger. Donations from local shelters, art from community centers, tables reserved for those who couldn't afford the ticket but had stories worth feeding. The room shimmered in low light, golden against deep navy walls, mismatched flatware, handwritten name cards, fresh bread already steaming in linen baskets. Each dish was crafted with intention. Grief met spice in a cumin-laced broth. Joy arrived in citrus-dressed greens, and dessert, my grandmother's sweet potato pie, was served in tiny ramekins, each dusted with nutmeg and the memory of what we survived. I wore a soft gray chef's coat, no embroidery, no title, just Delaney. At the far end of the long communal table sat familiar faces I hadn't seen in a while. Jolene, quieter now, no lipstick, her hair no longer pulled tight. She came alone and didn't ask to speak, just smiled softly when our eyes met. Eliza arrived 15 minutes late, sat in the back, didn't eat much, but she was there. For the first time, she stayed for all 3 courses. When a volunteer offered her seconds, she said yes. Walter, my father, arrived awkwardly. He didn't linger. He brought an old watch to hand me, a family heirloom I didn't know existed. "Figured you should have something," he mumbled. I accepted it, not because I needed it, but because I saw in his shaky hand a rare attempt to offer instead of expect. I walked through the tables during service, pausing here and there, not as a host, but as someone home. Later, after the last plate was cleared and dessert trays gleamed with crumbs and coffee rings, the lights dimmed slightly, the music faded. They asked me to speak. I didn't prepare a speech. I hadn't needed to. I looked out at the guests, faces lit by candlelight and hard-won peace, and said the only thing that still rang true. I used to think my story began with being silenced, with being told I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too much, but really my story started on the night I fell asleep at dinner. A few chuckled, some nodded. I was exhausted, yes, but not just from work. I was tired of being invisible, of shrinking to fit, of never being the version of myself that others needed. That moment, when they laughed, when no one asked if I was okay, that was when something inside me whispered, "Wake up." The room went still. I'm standing here because I listened. Eventually, quietly, in pieces, but I listened. My voice broke slightly. I let it. No one turned away. Tonight isn't about proving anything. It's about witnessing. Every dish you tasted carried someone's truth. Every flavor layered with fear and healing and hope. We didn't cook for praise. We cooked to be heard. I paused, let the words settle. Thank you for listening. The room didn't erupt. It exhaled, long and warm, and that was enough. After the guests had gone, after the dishes were washed and the lights dimmed low, I sat at the head of the table, the same spot where I had once waited quietly while others decided what I was worth. But this time, the table was mine. To my left, Gloria sipped wine and told Nate he still plated desserts too fast. Across from me, Garrett made jokes with the new pastry assistant. No one asked for permission to laugh or speak or dream. They just belonged. The camera crew had packed up. The producers had gone home. But someone kept filming. A quiet B-roll moment they said they might use later, or maybe they just wanted to keep it. I didn't pose. I just leaned back, watched the room I had rebuilt from soot and memory, listened to the low murmur of chosen family, and smiled. Not the smile you give a stranger, not the smile you paste on for approval. A real smile, the kind that says, I made it, the kind that says, even if I was born into fire, I learned how to carry it without being burned. If you've ever been underestimated, silenced, or told to shrink, this story was cooked for you. Pull up a chair, taste what truth sounds like, and stay for the fire that refuses to go out. Because some kitchens heal more than hunger, and some voices rise louder when they're stirred from the quiet. This isn't just a story, it's a table being rebuilt, one honest bite at a time. And there's still a seat waiting for you,